We're at a place where the Mustang is fun to drive, but it's got a few problems. I'm gonna put it up on the hoist and take care of 4 things all at once. The stance is off. We are 27 and maybe 3/8 bottom of the front right fender. I'm gonna fix that with some new coils. The back end bounces around like a trampoline. I'm confident the shocks are worn out, so I have a new set of those to put on. Every time I hit a bump, I hear clanks and clunks. I'm pretty sure every bushing in the whole car is shot, so I have a complete Prothane bushing kit. This is supposed to have everything in it. I guess we'll find out. Finally, while I've got the thing in the air, there is no transmission kickdown cable installed. I have the kickdown cable from Locar. Don't even know what to expect on that, but I'd kind of like to have that thing hooked up. Yeah, that's seen better days. Notice it doesn't even extend on its own. Pretty bad. Garbage. Last time I checked, there were exactly 0 projects that involve the undercarriage of a car that I enjoy. I think that number is still the same. This is not one of the more fun jobs, but it's coming along. I have the strut bushings replaced. I have the sway bar off and the bushings ready to go on there. And I found something really kind of curious. It looks like the driver's side upper control arm has been completely replaced at some point. The passenger side upper control arm has not, and that one looks like it might have some issues. My theory is that the upper control arm on this thing is making a lot of noise. I have new bushings for the lower control arm. I'm thinking I'll replace the upper control arm. We'll need to remove the shock and then the spring, and then we can take off the spindle, and then from there, pull the control arms. It's really not one of my favorite jobs. Luckily, the brace doesn't have to come all the way off. It just has to be loosened. The only thing really supporting this at this point is the shock, which is really not awesome. Shock is under load, under tension, and it makes it a little more difficult to loosen these nuts on the bottom of the shock. So I'm gonna support the outer edge of this, get the load off the shock. That'll make it easier to pull the nuts off. It'll also take the load off the shock, so it shouldn't be so hard on it. With all the bolts out, shock tower dismounted, we can pull the shock out from the center of the coil. We have the compressor situated in there, something like that. Don't try this at home, kids. Aha! There you go. One down. Here's the first spring that came out. Here's the replacement. You can see the difference. This one will have a softer flex to it, I can tell. The coils are smaller. The diameter of the spring steel is less. But out of the gate, there's about a 2-inch difference right there. I'm kind of holding that upside down. The shock and the spring out of the way, all the work we have left is in this area. So I'm going to take this on up where it's a little more accessible. That's a much better working height. We've got to remove this joint here, this ball joint here, top and bottom of the spindle. That relieves the upper control arm and the lower control arm. The problem is getting the shaft of the ball joint out of the hole on the spindle. The reason it's a problem is that the hole is conical, the shaft is conical, so the tighter it's on there, the more it's wedged in place. Sometimes you get lucky and you can wrap on the bottom of that with a hammer. If you do that, make sure the nut is on the threads, otherwise you'll peen the threads over and it'll make it real tough to get that nut back on. Now, I don't know what you call that thing. That might be a ball joint puller. I don't know. I'm pulling on that pretty hard. Yeah, that wouldn't have come with a hammer. There. That one, on the other hand, might have. That looks like a new ball joint up here. But, you know what? I was actually kind of hoping that thing would feel loose. I can't figure out where the clanks and clunks are coming from. If all I needed to do was replace the upper control arm, I could leave this alone. But since I also want to put new bushings in the lower control arm, the whole thing really needs to come off. Now we need some nifty way to hold the spindle up so that it doesn't drag on the hydraulic brake line. Doesn't have any obvious looseness. I'd really like to find the smoking gun here. Have I mentioned how much I do not like undercarriage work? There's the lower control arm. This is another one of those jobs that would have been much easier to do before I put the engine in. There's the upper control arm. There are no obvious signs of clunky in there. This side's emptied out. Now's the moment to decide whether to put in the Shelby Drop, which basically involves drilling 2 new holes exactly 1 inch below the existing mount holes. And when the new control arm goes on, it goes into those new holes. At this point, I'm thinking, why not? Note that the 2 holes are 4 3/4 inch apart. We want to go exactly 1 inch down, and we want them to end up 4 3/4 inch apart. The only trick is to make sure that we don't have them 4 3/4 inch apart too far forward or too far backward. We'll use an angle measurement for that. We are 4 15/16. Do the same thing here, and we're 4 13/16. We need the holes to move about 1/16 of an inch that direction. And we want to start with a fairly small hole. My preference is a stepper bit. I'm waiting for parts for the front end, so I'm going to spend a little time here on the back end. What we got to do is drop these leaf springs off. There are 2 bolts in the back, a bolt in the front. We'll need to support the axle because once the leaf spring comes off, there's nothing left to hold that up there. Wow! Hey, genius! The shock connects to the same thing that holds the bottom of the leaf spring in place. So I got to take the shock back off. We're released on this end. Now we need to get the shackle off. That bolt was far more cooperative than I expected it to be. All right, there's the leaf spring. I suspect that pressing those bushings out of there is going to be an ordeal, but we'll get after it. The new stuff from Prothane isn't rubber. It's a, I don't know, polyurethane? I guess that would make sense. More of kind of a plastic, which means that the ride will be a little stiffer. And in this car, I'll welcome that. It's been too soft. Feels like a Cadillac. I'm in wait mode. I'm waiting for paint to dry and I'm waiting for parts to arrive. So in the meantime, I'll do just a little bit of cleanup. Oh, much better. Hey, parts are here. We're ready. This is the upper control arm. I have the grease zerks installed. I have a few pumps of grease into each one of them. The only surprise to me is that the studs that are in the arm are a different thread pitch than what came out of it, which inherently isn't a big deal, but it didn't come with any nuts. Again, not a big deal. I have nuts, I'll go ahead and put those on there, but I don't know, I just kind of thought maybe it would be a little more complete than that. After doing a little cleanup work on these perches, I decided not to reuse them, figuring that part of the slop might be in that joint, and although I can't feel it, it's clear that these are pretty used. So I picked up these alternatives. These are Scott Drake, and I have 0 experience with them. They seem quite compatible, so we'll go with it. All that's left on this side is the shock, and that will be easier to do after I lower the car. So I'll do the other side, come back over here and hit the shock here. And the new parts for the back end have arrived. I have new U-bolts, and I have new shackles. Well, that side's looking good. The leaf springs are on. New shackles. I did use the Prothane bushings, front and back. Everything's kind of painted up and refreshed. We're on the final stretch. The rear end is all put together. The wheels are put back on. The transmission kickdown cable is installed on the transmission side. All I need to do is put the shock absorbers on the front, remount the wheels, and tighten down the flex brace, and we should be good to go. It feels good to have this come together, and I'm excited to see how it turns out, but I still have the same number of favorite projects that involve the undercarriage of a car. Yeah, 0. Not fun. We are now sitting at 27. Time to go out and see what we've got. Well, I can tell already that it rides stiffer. I welcome that. Okay, out of the gate, the steering is tighter, so that's a bonus. And so far I don't hear any clunks. Bonus number 2. Well, that's good. I needed something to offset the fact that the drop was nowhere near what I expected. That coil, that new spring that I bought, was advertised as about a 1-inch drop, and I recognize that others have had similar mileage on that spring, meaning that they also expect about a 1-inch drop, and they don't get it either. Mostly, I think, the drop comes up a little shorter than expectations because the stock spring is already so worn that the front end is sitting lower than it's supposed to. I saw some reviews that said that they actually raised the front end when they put the spring on. If the factory spring is so worn out that the front is drooping compared to where it should be when it's stock. You can see how that could happen. All that work resulted in about a 3/8 of an inch drop. And that's coupled with the Shelby Drop that's supposed to give, what, 5/8? So the new spring might have actually raised my front end, and the drop that I got is all from the Shelby Drop. However, there is enough good out of this that I'm pretty happy with the whole thing. Yes, I would have appreciated a little more drop on the front end, but boy, the steering is just like night and day better. Very tight. And look, I had the camber bolts out of it, and so I'm probably completely out of alignment, and yet it feels better. Way less slop in the steering, way more true. The ride is definitely stiffer, and it's not so stiff that I feel like I'm on a 2x4, but stiff enough that I feel like I'm actually now feeling the road. The rear shocks are definitely making a difference. There's no more float and bounce in the tail end. Final assessment, I guess, it means that I didn't get the front end to drop as much as I would have liked. That's the downside. But I've got a better ride. I've got tighter steering. I've got no more clunks so far. It sounds really good, and I'm on a bumpy road. So that's a major improvement. And I don't have the back end bouncing up and down the way it was. So all in all, that project was a big success. The kickdown cable is installed still only on the transmission side. I need to hook that up to the carburetor linkage. But now that it's a cable instead of the Ford lever, it should be much easier to do. The clunks and clanks are gone. The ride just feels so much better. It's solid, like completely different. Like hitting little bumps before I anticipated the sound that would come out from under the car, and it bothered me a little bit, like fingernails on a chalkboard, and that sound is gone. Habitually now I approach bumps, I see the bump coming, and I expect to hear the sound, and when it doesn't make the sound, then I get to smile. Oh yeah, we're miles ahead. So now if I can get the alignment trued right up, I'll take it into an alignment shop now that I have everything tightened up, buttoned down. That should really true up the steering and help the car shoot straight arrow down the road. I'm happy with it. I mean, seriously, the result is just outstanding here. It feels like it's gone from a clunkety, clankety jalopy to the muscle car that it's supposed to be. I am very happy with that.